On a scorching day at a Navy SEAL training base, a young black woman stood out among the recruits, not because of her strength, not because of her endurance, but because of the tattoo inked boldly across her arm. Laughter rippled through the ranks, whispered insults rising into mocking chuckles. They thought it was a joke, a symbol she hadn't earned, a mark that didn't belong on her skin. But none of them knew the truth. That tattoo carried a legacy deeper than any of their medals. And when the general arrived on base that afternoon, everything changed. The military base was alive with intensity, as recruits pushed themselves through grueling drills, designed to break the body and test the spirit. Among them was Sergeant Maya Johnson, a young black woman whose determination had carried her through countless trials. She was no stranger to doubt or discrimination. Her path to this moment had been riddled with whispers that she didn't belong, that she would never survive the standards that only the toughest could endure. Yet here she stood, chest heaving, muscles aching, refusing to falter. But it wasn't her grit that caught the attention of her fellow SEAL candidates that morning. It was the tattoo that wrapped along her forearm, a striking emblem, bold lines etched into her skin, marking her heritage, her sacrifice, and a family story most could never begin to understand. The murmurs started quietly at first. Some scoffed, some sneered. A few shook their heads with disdain. By the time training ended, laughter echoed behind her back. They thought the tattoo was nothing more than an attempt at stolen valor. In their eyes it was a mark she had no right to wear, a symbol reserved for men, for warriors, for legends whose names were carved into history. To them, Maya was an outsider, a pretender in their ranks. Still she carried herself with a calm resolve, her silence sharper than any words. She had learned long ago that proving yourself rarely came from answering taunts, it came from surviving them. But deep inside, the weight of the stares and smirks pressed on her like an invisible burden. She could feel the storm building, though she didn't yet know how fierce it would become, or how suddenly it would turn in her favor. The following days at training blurred together in a punishing cycle of sweat, grit, and exhaustion. Yet for Maya the drills weren't the hardest part. It was the quiet ridicule that trailed her everywhere she went. During push-ups, she could feel the eyes on her arm. During sprints, she heard the low chuckles when her sleeve rolled up. In the barracks, whispers passed from bunk to bunk, mocking the tattoo as if it were a crime etched into her skin. At first, she ignored them. She had endured worse in life. Teachers who doubted her, classmates who mocked her background, recruiters who second-guessed her potential. But this was different. Here, in the place where brotherhood was supposed to mean everything, she was being set apart. Not because she lacked the strength or discipline, but because of a symbol that carried a meaning none of them bothered to ask about. One evening, after a brutal water exercise, she overheard two recruits laughing near the showers. Who does she think she is, walking around with that like she's earned it? She'll wash out soon enough. That ink won't mean anything when she's gone. Their words hit harder than any wave that had dragged her under that day. She didn't respond, but she clenched her fists until her nails bit into her palms. The isolation grew. Small things, the way teammates passed equipment without meeting her eyes, the way group conversations went silent when she walked past, added weight to her already heavy load. It wasn't just about a tattoo. It was about what it represented to them, defiance of their unspoken rule about who deserved honor, who was allowed to carry a legacy, who belonged. But Maya's tattoo wasn't rebellion, it was remembrance. The ink was a tribute to her late father, a decorated soldier who had sacrificed his life in service. The emblem marked his unit, his valor, his name that still echoed in military halls. Maya had carried his memory through every trial of her life, and with each drill she felt him beside her, whispering the courage she needed to continue. Still, no one around her knew that truth, and no one cared to ask. To them, she was just an imposter with ink she hadn't earned. The tension reached its peak one morning when the recruits assembled on the field. A senior instructor, noticing the constant glances, called her out in front of everyone. His words were sharp, meant to sting. "Johnson, looks like your little artwork's getting more attention than your performance. You think you can live up to that mark, or is it just for show?" The laughter that followed cut deep. Maya's jaw tightened, but she stood tall, refusing to flinch. Silence was her shield, but inside, a storm raged. How many times would she have to prove her worth? How many times would her presence be questioned, her identity doubted, her legacy dismissed? What no one knew was that fate was about to intervene in the most unexpected way. Later that week, the base commander announced that the general himself would be visiting the camp for a surprise inspection. The air shifted instantly. Respect replaced arrogance, and fear silenced laughter. For the first time, the same recruits who had mocked Maya now looked uneasy. And when the general finally arrived, his eyes landed on her tattoo. His reaction would change everything. The general's presence commanded silence the moment he stepped onto the training grounds. His uniform bore the weight of decades of service, and his medals glimmered under the harsh sun like fragments of untold stories. Every recruit straightened their posture, eyes fixed forward, fear mingling with awe. Maya stood among them, her heart pounding harder than during any drill. She could still feel the sting of humiliation from the instructor's words echoing days before. Her tattoo, still a source of scorn, burned on her arm, as though it knew something monumental was about to happen. The general walked slowly down the line, inspecting each recruit with sharp precision. When he reached Maya, his gaze stopped. The silence thickened. He didn't look at her face first, he looked at her arm. At the tattoo, a flicker crossed his stern features, recognition. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing, not in disdain but in memory. Then, to everyone's shock, the general rolled up his own sleeve. The crisp fabric revealed ink aged, weathered by time, but unmistakably the same insignia etched onto Maya's skin. Gasps rippled through the ranks. The very symbol they had mocked her for was also marked on the most powerful man on the field. The general's voice cut through the silence, steady but heavy with meaning. Though his words carried no explanation to the others, his tone made it clear. This tattoo was not just decoration. It was lineage, it was sacrifice, it was honor, carried forward. For Maya, the moment was vindication. For the recruits, it was revelation. All the laughter, the whispers, the contempt, they collapsed under the weight of the general's silent testimony. In a single gesture, he had exposed their ignorance. The field that once echoed with mockery now held only awe. And though no one dared speak, every recruit understood Maya had not only earned her place, she carried a legacy that demanded respect. The silence after the general's gesture lingered long after he moved down the line. None of the recruits dared to meet Maya's eyes. Their earlier mockery hung over them like a shadow they couldn't shake. The same people who had dismissed her, doubted her, and laughed behind her back now carried the sting of shame. But Maya didn't bask in their discomfort. She wasn't there for their approval, she was there for something far greater. That tattoo had never been about proving herself to strangers. It had been a promise to her father, a vow that she would honor his legacy by carrying it forward, no matter how heavy the burden. In the weeks that followed, the energy around her shifted. No one openly apologized, but the silence changed its shape. It was no longer filled with ridicule, it was filled with respect. Recruits began including her in drills, relying on her strength during grueling tasks, and learning, quietly, what it meant to endure with dignity. The general never spoke about the tattoo again, but he didn't have to. His silent acknowledgement had been more powerful than any lecture. It forced the others to confront the prejudice they had carried so casually. For Maya, it was confirmation that she had never been alone in her fight. Her father's sacrifice was alive not just in her memory, but in the ink she bore, and in the unspoken bond with a leader who carried the same mark. Yet beneath the surface, the lesson was larger than her personal victory. It was a mirror held up to the culture within those barracks, and beyond them, a reminder that bias can blind people to truth, that honor has no skin color, and that legacy cannot be erased by ignorance. For Maya, surviving that season of ridicule wasn't just about proving she could endure. It was about showing that dignity can outlast cruelty, and truth can silence mockery. She emerged from training not only stronger in body, but unshakable in spirit. The tattoo remained, not as a wound but as a beacon, an emblem of belonging that no one could strip from her. And for those watching her journey unfold, the question remained, how many legacies have been overlooked, dismissed or ridiculed because of prejudice? How many stories of sacrifice lie buried under judgment, waiting to be honored? In the end, Maya's triumph was not just hers. It was a call to everyone who has ever been underestimated or ridiculed for their identity. A call to remember that true honor doesn't come from the approval of others, but from the resilience to keep standing when the world tries to push you down. Because sometimes, the ink on the skin tells more truth than the words in a room.